Welcome to the State of the Nation. We are very excited today to have our recently deposed Mayor of Johannesburg, sadly, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, with us today. Now, she has been voted out of office. The coalition plates shifted, and suddenly Johannesburg is left with a mayor from a party that I think polled about 1% in the last local government election. Clearly, this is not what the voters chose, that the leader should come from a party that doesn't really even register on the political Richter scale, but this is where our politics are. But we want to discuss broader issues, and I'd like to welcome to the State of the Nation Dr. Mpho Phalatse. Dr. Phalatse Mpho, I'm going to call you if you don't mind. Welcome to the State of the Nation. I know we had you on in a virtual setting at the time when you were fighting your legal battles.
Yes.
And you told me at that time, and I couldn't quite believe that there was any merit to it, because it looked like a foregone conclusion that you were going to fight it and win. You fought it and you won. But the forces regrouped. And yeah, you sit as the ex-mayor. Welcome to the State of the Nation, ex-mayor.
Thank you. You only seem to talk to me when I'm ousted.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, I hope I'm not a bad omen. But anyway, let's look at it this way. We are going to be talking to you because there's a whole career ahead of you.
Right. Okay, I'll take that.
The Johannesburg part of it, we know, is a seedy, ugly, dirty story of broken promises, broken agreements, not just promises.
Yeah, it's been rough. Yeah,
it's been rough. So the biggest issue, as I see, and I follow these things quite closely, seems to be the fact that agreement was in place, and suddenly the people that had signed to that agreement want to change the agreement after they've agreed. Is that right?
That's a very simplistic way of looking at it. My understanding, so last year when we brought in the Patriotic Alliance initially, my understanding was that they'd always said they wanted two portfolios, but there was almost a show of good faith kind of agreement where it was agreed they could come in, get the one, and we'll see when we review the coalition agreement how things would go. But that review hasn't happened yet. So we were still operating on the original coalition agreement. We'd not had time to look at what's working, what's not. And so I think there was a mismatch in expectations, to be honest. And I don't think it would be fair to say that the pair always wanted one position. My understanding at the time we brought them in was, this is all we can give them for now, but we'll see with time whether we can maneuver and give them more. So that was always my understanding. But these coalition agreements are very tricky. I do think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done for us to get it completely right.
Yeah, and we'll touch on coalitions and how best to make them work in the future. So now, one just where it erupted is that obviously the Patriotic Alliance from the word go was an unhappy partner, seemingly. Kind of like it seemed like like you were under constant threat from the Patriotic Alliance.
I didn't feel that way. It didn't feel like it. We had them in the health and social development portfolio. We had the then MMC Ashley Sauls the first in that portfolio. Great guy. We worked very well together. I do come from a health background. So we were able to really collaborate, and he relied on me for advice, and I really had a great working relationship with him. We did some great things. We opened one substance abuse treatment center. We had a sword turning for another facility in the Doornfontein area, and so on. We reestablished the district health council, which was a big breakthrough after many years of it being on hold. So those are just a few examples of things we were able to achieve. I really enjoyed working with him. I kind of feel like we all got comfortable, and I feel like we forgot, what the original request was from the PA, and there were never really timelines attached to it as to when is this coalition agreement going to be reviewed, when are we going to look at the possibility of giving the PA two portfolios, etc. I don't think that we had committed to that level, and I think that's where the risk was.
Yes.
And in hindsight, I would have done things differently.
Yeah, but certainly some of your coalition partners, mainly Action SA, and we've had them on many times, and we're going to be having Michael Baumann soon. Their game plan, much like it feels like when Herman Mashaba was mayor of Joburg, is give these guys anything they want, just let us stay in power. That seems to be their game plan. Am I reading it wrong?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to assume that I know, what the game plan is. And it's good Michael is coming. I'm sure he can talk to that. I do think that, yes, you've got to have parameters. That's important. You've got to be able to mitigate risks that you see. That's very important. But equally, you've got to be realistic. And the reality is nobody got a clear mandate to govern Johannesburg. And the argument is, what's better? Is it better to have Johannesburg in the hands of Al-Jamaa? Is it better to have Johannesburg in the hands of this coalition? In the last week, if you look at decisions that have been made, boards of entities have been told not to do anything. Decisions from as far back as September last year are being put on hold. These include charging of senior officials who've been pointed in cases of corruption. And we're very concerned about those kinds of decisions. You look at the acting appointments in the last few days, very questionable appointments that we're very concerned about. So that would be another argument. What's better for residents? Is it better to just let this coalition carry on and take Joburg down the drain? Is it better to fight and see how far you can go to reach a compromise that'll actually benefit the residents of Johannesburg?
Yeah, look, it seemed to me as a resident of Johannesburg, and I raised this in a recent interview I did with John Steenhuisen, that as a resident of Johannesburg, it doesn't feel like anything's happening. Even under under your coalition. If you drive here, we're sitting here in Parkhurst, and just drive down this road, it looks like we're in downtown Ukraine. There's potholes that you'll lose your car. The infrastructure is gone. You only see Metro Police for roadblocks, and the city seems to be not governed at all, right? And with the best respect, even in the time that you were in charge. Now we've got another coalition that seem to be committed to finishing it off. To be honest, I mean, if you're going to make Kenny Kunene your MEC for transport, what are you telling people, right? You're saying, please, here's the keys to the safe, have a go, right? That's obviously where we're heading. And is the job of repairing Johannesburg just so monumental that nobody can do it unless you've got a dictatorial mandate?
I wouldn't say so. I think it's doable. I think the repair and rebuild of Johannesburg is something that's achievable. I do think that in our coalition we had challenges. I'll give you an example. Besides the fact that it was a big coalition, it was complex, there was instability, and we were always under the threat of being removed. And that, of course, does take a bit of your focus, to how do we survive? How do we make sure that we stay in government so we can actually carry on with the rebuild and repair? But let's talk about Action SA, since you brought them up. Action SA and the DA. Very interesting dynamic that was at play in the coalition. And it's interesting, the portfolios you mentioned are transport, which was an Action SA portfolio. You mentioned Metro Police, which was an Action SA portfolio. Now, let's use those two as an example. I'm the mayor, and I've got an Action SA MMC for public safety. I've got an Action SA MMC for transport. Relationally, there were challenges there. Those challenges stem from the fact that Action SA is needing to differentiate itself from the DA. Action SA comes from the Democratic Alliance. Many people out there feel they've not really been able to demonstrate ideologically what the difference is between them and the DA. And there was that need in our government, and it played out in the executive. Now, as the Office of the Executive Mayor, you're supposed to provide oversight, conduct oversight on all the portfolios, regardless of which political party is in charge of the portfolio. You're supposed to drive integration, coordination where it is necessary. And where I had the greatest challenge with that role was where Action SA portfolios were concerned. So if you talk about potholes, for instance, if you go down in the history of the last few months, you'll find correspondence. You'll find even statements that are issued. You'll find a statement that MMC Transport issued where we were discussing potholes, and I was questioning the approach to repairing potholes citywide. And I found that there was a skewed focus on certain parts of the city, to the expense of other parts of the city. Now, remember that there are constituencies in the city. And when there's no clear separation of party and state, you can easily see something start to play out where certain constituencies are marginalized for services and in favor of others, right? And that's the sense that we were getting, from my office, just looking at the data over the time that this pothole repair program was unfolding, this thing that the MMC was driving. And we then had to call them to my office and say, but there's something wrong here, why do we have this skewed picture? And we tried to ask them to please just be fair and target all constituencies the same. Of course, other issues then came up. That filling of potholes is actually, it goes beyond just the Joburg Roads Agency. There's so many other related issues. And when those were brought to my attention, I then called other NMCs on board, and we tried to see how they could offer support to the JRA to filling those potholes. So we were starting to work more cohesively, but it took time, because there's this politics that tends to creep up in our line of duty. The other example is public safety, which is again a public safety portfolio. It was an Action SA portfolio. And we had challenges there relationally as well. Towards the end, I must say, we were starting to get it right, but we'd had some tiffs where I would see our crime stats for the first time in the media, and if I asked the MMC, but why are you not coming to discuss this with me? I would be told things that were very questionable, considering the Office of the Mayor is still the Office of the Mayor with its full delegations, regardless of whether it's a coalition or not. And so, yes, the politics did play out, particularly with Action SA DA. Not so much with the other portfolios. I didn't have any issues with the IFP and human settlements. We had a great relationship, no issues with, for instance, community development under the ACDP. Great relationship with MMC Ronald Harris. So I think those things did complicate things a bit. Yes, there were backlogs that we inherited. So realistically, we were not going to fix the city in 13 months.
Yeah, okay.
Even if we were brilliant, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
The last infrastructure audit that was done was actually done, I think, in 2017, and that gave us the 300 billion rand backlog. You can imagine where it is now. It's a lot bigger than that. Now, if you look at the city's capital budget, it's only 7.7 billion per annum. That's what we had this year, and we're in the process of actually rebasing our budget. So we're reducing our budget. And the reason for that is because there's been factors beyond our control that we have to now factor into the budget. Historically, the city has always budgeted on previous year's budget, not necessarily on previous year's performance. And so we're changing that. So we were in the process of actually reorientating our budgets to look at where were we, how did we perform, as opposed to what was the budget last financial year. So year on year in the city, there was this culture of just adding and adding and increasing. There's so much that's happened. There's inflation, the cost of living. We're not collecting as much revenue as we would like. With the war in Ukraine, we've been affected, even locally, and so on.
Yeah, we got affected when the Russians bombed our roads, by the looks of things. Yeah.
So you're not bringing in the revenue that you should be bringing in. Our revenue collection targets have not been reached in the last few months. And if you look at what our residents are going through, you can see you're competing for very limited disposable income, in our households. You've got people moving off the grid. So load shedding is also another factor. One, you're not selling as much electricity as what you would normally sell, because half the time people are load shed, and two, people are really starting to look at alternative power sources, and with that we're losing that revenue. Our network is not yet configured in a manner that we can also benefit from those people getting off the grid. That's something that City Power was working on, but we were not there yet. So with all these losses,
Yes.
You've got cash flow challenges, right, which are beyond your control. What are your other sources of revenue? You've got loans. Loans must go through council, and then you have politicians or opposition parties that play politics with that sort of thing as well. You'll be aware that we tried to bring in a 2 billion rand loan from DBSA, which was pretty much done and dusted, and yet we couldn't take it through council because these parties that are now in government refused to approve the loan, and we didn't have the numbers. So we were vulnerable as a minority government. All these things contribute towards your ability to do your job.
Yes.
So the politics of the day don't make it easy to govern. The fact that Joburg is already broken, the fact that you already have all these backlogs that you're inheriting, that even if you had all the money in the world, you would not be able to address in just 1 year. It just doesn't help at all. So what was important was to communicate a lot, which we did try to do, so that we set realistic expectations and targets so that our residents know where we are, and instead of complaining, become part of the team that tries to rebuild, pay their bills. By paying your bills, you're actually enabling government to do something, in the face of all these challenges that I've mentioned, and doing your bit. We were also opening up certain spaces to the private sector where the city had never done so before. So you are aware with electricity, for instance, in November we issued the first RFP for independent power producers to come in, and that was just the first tranche. So City Power has a whole plan to bring in incrementally more independent power producers to help us offset load shedding and just stabilize the energy supply situation in Johannesburg. That means that we would be able to do what government won't be able to do on its own, because we're starting to open up spaces that were closed to the private sector, and we're starting to say, no, come in, because we want to be able to resolve our issues quickly. We were working very closely with our PPP office, our public-private partnership office. This is an office that's supposed to assist us. I don't know if you've ever been exposed to PPPs in government. They take long. They're very long-winded, very complex to put together. Most of the time, by the time your political term ends, you've not even achieved what you wanted to achieve, and then a new government comes in, there's a change in direction. So what we were trying to do through this office was to get this office to fast-track triple Ps and manage our pipeline of PPP projects. And these were largely large infrastructure projects that we were focusing on, so that we help also close this gap. Another thing we were working on was setting up an infrastructure fund, just in recognition of the fact that we can't bring in enough through own revenue. We've got limitations where loans are concerned, and grants and subsidies from national and provincial are also gazetted, limited, mostly conditional, and so there wasn't really much leeway to move. So the infrastructure fund was really geared towards assisting us to begin to close the infrastructure gap.
But we know from the past that there were always going to be problems with some of the issues that you had, certainly even within your coalition. I've had Herman Mashaba here many times, a man I like, but he never fails to mention that his problem with the DA is that they were more concerned about cutting grass in Sandton or building houses in Diepsloot. They're sort of like that, kind of like you can't do both at the same time. So, that's kind of a stick that's always used to beat the failing of a coalition government, right? Certainly as far as that concerned. Right?
I don't see that at all. I didn't see it play out in our multi-party government at all. This is something that was brought up during Herman's tenure, which was really a serious bone of contention that led to him leaving the party ultimately. I don't believe that it's an either or. I believe it's important to take care of your developed areas. All you need to do there is maintenance, really, and then develop the underdeveloped areas. Sitting with a ratepayer base that's disgruntled is also a risk.
It's got to be a massive risk because your income is coming from the part that your partners are saying, let's not provide adequate servicing to. So let's move it on, because obviously the Joburg story is well documented. But I want to focus on two things. Firstly, let's talk about, does your experience in Joburg, how badly does it augur for the future of coalitions in South Africa? If you had your biggest problems with your closest ideological partners, one would say.
I think that if we don't move quickly to strengthen legislation to assist to stabilize our governments, we are at risk as a country, particularly with 2024 being around the corner. What we went through in the last 13 months, I would not want to see at a national level. And all indications are that we will have a coalition government in 2024 in some form or another, with the ANC going below 40% for the first time by all projections. So yes, there does need to be legislative change that's going to help. During one of our mayoral breakaways within the DA, we had a former mayor from Denmark who now serves as a deputy mayor, and one of the things she said that I found quite interesting is that in Denmark, you're not allowed to table a motion of no confidence on a sitting mayor. We simply don't have that kind of legislation in South Africa. If you look at the situation in Ekurhuleni, the reason they haven't been able to table another motion of no confidence on Mayor Tanya Campbell is because they did one, and they've got a rule in council that says you can't do it within so many months of the last one. But if you look at what's happening there, they're already trying to change that back to the Joburg situation where you can virtually have a motion of no confidence every month.
Yeah.
That doesn't augur well for service delivery, and something drastic needs to happen before 2024 elections.
Do you see that changing? Because suddenly the same problem is besetting every party, right? Because you could realistically start motions of no confidence every sitting, right, here, now that you're in opposition. And they could get the same treatment, which is, might be wonderful, sort of may give you a nice feeling politically, but for the city, it's a very bad, or for that political entity, in this case, we're talking the city, but if, even worse if it's the country. And we felt it a little bit in the Jacob Zuma days, where you've got these endless motions of no confidence, which this bloc is going to defend and that bloc's going to attack. And the people that get killed, when the two elephants fight, is the grass, right?
Yeah.
In that case, it was the country. We were dying because now the state captures could capture away, because the politicians are worried only about saving their leader and so on. Do you think that the ANC, and because they're still the majority in Parliament, if it's going to get fixed before 2024, they better believe it's worth fixing? Do you think there's any chance that they will do it? I don't.
I hope they do, because it would reflect very badly on them. There's been some voices from within the ANC, concerns about instability in municipalities since the 2021 local government election.
Really? Where do those voices come from? They've presided over a country that's fallen apart.
Not the current ANC, more the veterans within the party. But what I'm saying here is, it's in the interest of the ANC to provide leadership in stabilizing our governments, whether at a local level or wherever else. Now, if the ANC is not going to support that, it's going to backfire, in my view, because it says then they don't care about what's happening in our governments. Look at what's happening in the city of Johannesburg. I mean, if you look at our ousting at the end of September, we came back towards the end of October. From that time until now, we have felt it. We've felt a different energy from the administration, with people feeling like it could come again, and with the kinds of instructions that get issued, it's like you're going and then you're stopping, and then you're going in a different direction, and then you're stopping again, and you're going in a different direction. The morale of the officials in the administration is affected. So it's a big problem.
Yeah. And it's not made any better by the fact that the two of the more eminent parties, let's not call them a preeminent party, but two of the more eminent parties in the EFF and the PA seem to thrive on the chaos. That is their shtick. That is what they advertise. That's what the EFF say they're going to disrupt everything, and that's what they do. So they'll vote for you one day, then they won't vote for you. Then they'll vote for the other guy, then they'll vote against him. That's what they're going to do, and nothing has changed in the 10 years that they've been around. Patriotic Alliance, luckily, that's a little clearer. They're there to steal money. They've said that. And they're doing. They're going to the highest bidder. That's it. Put out the money and you know where you stand, and until the money runs out. So, are we served by this? I mean, we know how it's going to play out, surely.
Well, I mean, ultimately who we have in our councils is a function of elections. Ultimately, we have a choice, on that day of elections to show up first. If you look at voter turnout, it's very disappointing for people who in between elections complain so much, to see what few numbers actually turn up at the polls to make use of their power to change things. I'd like to see the change in 2024, because hopefully in this time, since 2021 November, we've learned some lessons and we've seen how important it is to cast our vote and to cast it wisely. We're working now with what we have.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice. We have to wait until the next election. In between, we must just see who's there and who we can work with. And we try different permutations until we find something that works.
And Mpho, if we can now move to your own situation, in the sort of aftermath of the mayoralty in Johannesburg, you've been quite public in the fact that you intend to stand for the leadership of the DA. And the statement that seems to have carried a lot of weight is that the leadership is out of touch with the masses of South Africa. This is a well-trodden path, isn't it?
Look, I wouldn't say that. I campaigned in 2021 to be mayor in Johannesburg. I spoke to many residents, many voters, and over I got the same response. So yes, we're asking, have we tried to go down this path before? Yes, we have. Did we follow through? No, we did not. Somewhere along the lines, we felt we need a different kind of focus and so on. And unfortunately, come 2024, we need all constituencies in South Africa to identify with the DA and to give us their mandate.
And let's call it what it is. We need a black leader for the DA, isn't it?
No, not at all. And I've never advocated for a black leader. I've always said, and I've used examples such as Chris Pappas, I've used examples such as Alan Winde, and I've always said people are looking for somebody that they can relate to, somebody that they believe is invested in them. And it's not a function of skin color. It goes so much deeper than that. A lot of black people love Chris Pappas. I don't know if you're aware.
Yeah.
It's not.
But it's a fairly unique story.
It's not because he speaks the language. I've spent time with him and I got to understand how invested he is and how he lives among the people. There's a big difference between enrolling for a course to learn a language and really investing yourself in people's culture and understanding their issues, their lived experiences, and carrying them and actually doing something to turn things around for them. That's what our people are looking for. And I understand that. I understand it because I was once one of those people. I joined the DA in 2015 when Mmusi Maimane was leader. I didn't join it because Mmusi was black necessarily. I joined it because the DA at that time made sense to me. Where there was mistrust before that era, I had mistrust. I never voted DA before that time because I didn't trust the DA as a black person in this country. I was not convinced that the DA sees me or is even aware of my issues. And during that era, I became convinced because of what was being driven. And there was a broader market that the DA was reaching, and I could see that and I could feel it as a black person. And I bought that and I came into the party. Of course, I looked at its policies and I liked the policies. The DA has great policies, by the way, but I relate to the experience of the person who says, I have trust issues because I've been there myself and I understand what turned things for me.
So are you saying that the great policies, they don't execute the great policies?
Well, I mean, a lot of our policies need to be executed when we're in government at national. You've just said yourself that the ANC still has majority. So, even
so they can't institute their policies.
So we've got great policies, but we need to govern so we can actually implement them. And for us to govern, we need a mandate of the majority of South Africans. And that's the pathway that a lot of people are missing.
100%.
It doesn't matter you have a great product, But if you can't sell the product,
Yeah.
then you're going to keep it in your warehouse, right?
You're right.
And what we need to do as the DA is we need to look at what is it that we're trying to achieve. Do we want to be able to implement our policies? And if the answer to that is yes, then we must be serious about wanting to govern. Some of the people who left the party left because they felt the party's not too serious about governing. We've got to narrow a focus, and we're not doing enough to appeal and attract to the masses. And I feel it's a valid point.
Do you think, because we actually had Celias Brink here earlier this week, and I asked him straight out, does the party have ambitions to govern? And he said yes, but then went into that DA speak of, we do have ambitions to govern, but we've got our principles, and we went down the road of trying, and it didn't work. And you get so sort of bored with that. But in South Africa, there is the genuine conundrum, because it's going to face the country in just over a year's time, where anyone can govern. Just give enough money to Patriotic Alliance, let Julius Malema have a couple of key portfolios, and you can govern, and there you go. And as long as you keep on cutting off pieces of your body and giving it to these parties, right, you can govern. Is that the right way to govern? Because you kind of, in a way, got sucked into that. And then those same people who never gave you a chance to perform, right, were quickly after the money. We want another MMC position. We want this, we want that. If they was, so I'm trying to find the logic in you saying, on the one hand, we could have been governing if we just gave them one more MMC position, right? That's governing, is it?
Okay, so we're talking retrospective and prospectively. Let's go back to the PA, right? Given the PA one more MMC position, yes, we would be governing.
Yeah.
There would be risk.
Yeah, they'd be asking for 3 seats by now.
There would be, I don't know. And I'm not going to say there would be, because I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is that even from the word go, they asked for 2 positions, and they never got 2 positions from us.
Did they deserve 2 positions based on the numbers?
1. Look, I mean, whether people deserve things or not, did Cope deserve the chair of chairs with 1 seat? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's arbitrary. There's no rule. And we've deviated. We gave Cope the chair of chairs that manages all the Section 79 oversight committees. We gave it to them with 1 seat in council. So to ask, did they deserve 2 MMCs? I just feel it's really arbitrary at this point. But let's look at what you then do where you have concerns. You put measures in place to mitigate risk. You lay down in your coalition agreement parameters. This will be allowed, this will not be allowed. At the first sight of this sort of behavior, this will be the consequence. And you follow through on that. That's what I believe you do. Like I said, we don't have an outright majority. We don't have a clear mandate. That's the reality. We can't leave municipalities hung, or we can't leave them in the hands of parties who just destroy them and run them to the ground. Come 2026, we'll have no city to fix. At least now there's something. So it's a very tough balancing act. Now let's talk prospectively. 2024. Why do I think there's a real opportunity for the DA here? If the DA increases its numbers, which it can only do by appealing to a broader market. Even though, yes, they will end up governing in a coalition, they will have significant enough numbers to make that coalition more manageable, hopefully. That's what I'm hoping to see. I don't want to see a 9-party coalition at national.
No.
I think that would be disastrous. But I think if the DA were to stretch itself beyond where it is now, everybody can agree we have a good governance brand, even though, yes, where there's been political challenges, we've not been able to demonstrate that, and that's frustrating. But if we could increase our numbers significantly, then we could maybe find a few parties that we can work with, that we've worked well with before, and that we trust can give stability to citizens of South Africa. And that's what I hope we can achieve for 2024.
And, last year we had an extremely heated discussion with Helen Zille on exactly this point, is that it doesn't help how good your policies are if you're sitting in opposition, right? So let's move to, since you made the announcement that you will be running, because there's a part that is that I think you'd be wonderful, but there's a problem with this, right? And the problem starts in the media, I think, because you have, for example, somebody like Clement Manyathela, who has an absolute orgasm every time there's a problem with the DA, suddenly giving you an interview and speaking to you like he's your best mate, like you've always been friends. But when you were in power, you were saying, aren't you just a spokesman for white people, right? So in other words, now suddenly, because it looks like you're disrupting the DA, in a way, it would suit the agenda to sort of welcome you on board. The same with Eusebius McKaiser. Suddenly he's giving you time. Whereas before, he wouldn't listen to you when you sort of raised the concerns about governing. But now that you're going to challenge John Steenhuisen, right, these mediums are suddenly hearing you and you're the favorite thing in the world. Whereas a month ago...
Let me first say that I'm not sure what the basis is of the statements you make about these individuals. I
make a lot of statements,
yes,
by the way.
Yes, and you have every right to, but I may not necessarily share the same sentiments. That's not been my experience. No. So Clement has interviewed me as mayor, and I've had a great interview with him. Eusebius, my last interview with Eusebius was when I was campaigning to be mayor of Joburg. Right. And again, we had a lovely chat. So I've never seen what you allude to. And I think this is a public interest story. It's a public interest story, not because it's Mpho versus Steenhuisen. I do believe that South Africans see the urgency of saving this country from the hands of the ANC. And I believe that South Africans are looking for an alternative. And I believe that they see the DA as a viable alternative. But I also believe that many South Africans, including DA members, believe that the DA would do better under a different leadership. And I don't know how often you speak to people within the party about how they feel about where the party is going. But a lot of people I talk to really feel we need change. The party needs to transform and so on. And I believe that's why this is so interesting. This Congress is not about the DA. It's about the future of South Africa, because which way we go in the Congress will determine what happens in this country post-2024. And I believe that's where the interest is coming from. I've had people from other political parties saying, we'll support you, because this is a national project. It's not about the DA. I've had funders who are outside a DA traditional, the DA traditional funding base saying, we will even sponsor you because this is a national project. And that's really how this is viewed. It's not about Mpho versus John Steenhuisen. It's about where's the country now? Where does the country need to go to? And what needs to happen to take the country there?
Yep.
And that's really what it's about.
You mentioned that the term transform.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the DA is untransformed?
Well, by transform, I mean what we spoke about earlier. Our focus, our appeal to the broader population in South Africa. I'm talking about internally transformation, where I've spoken openly about the culture of fear in the party, which I'd really like to see change. I'd like to see people more free to talk about how they really feel and not just talk in secret corners. I'd like to see people challenge things internally more that they're not happy with, so that we can, start to build a party that speaks to the majority of South Africans. These people represent those people, and they know the issues that are brought up on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like I'm with you on the need to, sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do, and if you want your product to be bought by more people, it's got to be more appealing to those people. I raised the issue with Helen Zille and with John Steenhuisen himself. Let's just imagine there was one of those movies where there's a strange wind that blows through, and suddenly President Ramaphosa agrees to do a debate, and he's debating John Steenhuisen. I said, my point is, it doesn't matter how well John debates, right? In the majority of South African households, it's not viewed as, that makes a lot of sense, I'll vote for him.
I think we connect differently. And I'll say again, it's not even a function of race. I've seen people connect.
Why don't you just say it's a matter of race?
It's not. I don't believe that.
I do think it is.
Really?
Because you previously said that the policies are good.
Yes.
So therefore, the record of governance is good, right?
Yes.
Okay. So therefore, why wouldn't they get more support? Why wouldn't a media that understands the damage that is being wrought by the current government, why wouldn't they be more pro the DA, right? Instead of mentioning the DA and Stellenbosch in the same sentence every single time. Do you understand what I mean? Where I'm going to with this?
I hear
so
you.
I'm saying I don't know if we served by you saying it's not about race. Let's make it about race because it's clearly about race.
I don't want to make it about race because I don't believe it's about race, and I'll tell you why. And I'm going back to Chris Pappas, and I know you're going to say it's a unique story, right? But having spent time with Chris, I know it's beyond him speaking the language, and I understand that Chris lives among all people. If you look at his schooling background, you look at where he spends his time, it's really interesting to see how really invested he is.
Yeah.
And he supports and he enjoys the trust of all constituencies because he has demonstrated his investment in all constituencies. And race did not stop him from gaining that trust. And that's why I think it's a question of trust and not so much a function of race. Because if somebody of Chris Pappas's race is able to enjoy trust and support, then surely anybody else can. But how do you build trust? That's where the conversation needs to go.
Yeah, I would imagine in answer to that, the way you're going to build the trust is when the product, in this case, political leadership, ethical political leadership guided by good policies, is the defining story here, right? Do you understand what I mean? I'm saying, and once again, I'm pointing largely at the coverage, because the coverage influences where the voters go to. I don't think the coverage has been fair at all, right? In the last couple of years, the country's gone to hell. But you can't pick up a report that doesn't say DA are bought and paid for by Stellenbosch, or it's a white party, or racist white DA. You've heard this. You've defended it many times. So you don't get beyond that. And the Chris Pappas story is wonderful. They will emerge. You'll have these butterflies, these unique stories, these unicorns that come along every now and again. For a while, you had it with Bongani Baloyi in Midvaal. This was like everybody's wet dream. What happens when as soon as Bongani Baloyi leaves, he climbs on the same bandwagon? So I'm saying it's clearly not about the policies or the performance.
I never said it was about the policies. In fact, I've been an advocate for DA policy. I am, though, also an advocate for breaking it down and simplifying it so everyone can understand it, regardless of educational background or socioeconomic strata that you come from. I think it's important if we're going to appeal to people. Do you know that before every general election, our pensioners will tell you, I'm voting ANC because I don't want to lose my old age pension.
To be fair, that happens in every country in the world. So,
but why is the DA not vocal about the fact that we will give you your old age pension?
Yes,
it's not an issue that we've ever driven very intentionally and with the level of intensity that it deserves, and we've left this perception to fester that a vote for the DA is a loss, a vote for losing your pension.
Yeah, and a vote to bring back apartheid.
Which is ridiculous, right? Yeah. Because if you look at the tax base and if you look at who contributes towards those pensions, it's everybody. It's every South African that contributes towards those. But because of the lack of knowledge and the knowledge gap that gets exploited by the likes of the ANC, and us sitting back and not being invested enough to dispel some of these untruths, we find ourselves on the back foot when we shouldn't. So the same goes for our policies. We've got great policies, really we do. But I do believe that we can package them in a manner that is palatable to all constituencies. And perhaps, yes, in their raw form, it's fine. We can keep them like that, but we can have, different packages for different constituencies so that the person on the ground understands, the person in the rural community understands what the DA is offering them, what the DA will do for them. And they see that actually these policies talk about me, you know, and the DA has really thought about my well-being. They've thought about the fact that I'm not politically connected and I've continued to be marginalized since 1994 at the expense of, you know, while the politically connected few continue to thrive. When people begin to understand things at that level, they will swing their allegiance. That's what I believe. So I've never attacked our policies. In fact, I've always maintained that our policies were part of the reason. I was an academic at Wits when I started looking at DA policies, and I looked at them through an academic lens. And what I found was that our policies are based on empirical evidence. They're not populist, you know, and they make sense. And they're also based on international best practice and so on. And so I've never had issues with our policies. I do have issues, though, with how we package them and how we sell them, the language we use, and our willingness to even take criticism on those aspects, the language. You know, is there a way in which you can phrase this without changing the material offering, but change it such that it's not offensive? Or, you know, is there a way? I believe that if we really, really invested, we can find ways for our policies to connect with all South Africans.
And you know what I believe, Mpho? I believe strongly that it matters who says it, how they say it. South Africa needs leadership. I think you're a leader. I would love to see you carry it through for the right reasons, which I think you're doing. And I wish you the absolute best in your soon struggle. I wish you the best. Good luck with your struggle. I wish you the best.
Someone called it an adventure.
Yeah, okay, no, I'll call it a struggle. But it's really, you've been a wonderful sport. There's been a wonderful discussion, and I wish you the best. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me
once again. And to everybody, if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel. I hope you enjoy this. We'll be bringing you a lot more content soon. To Mpho Phaltse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.